Good evening. I have 7 p.m. and I'll call the meeting to order. Ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Greg David,
Present.
Mr. Tyler Dean,
Here.
Miss Emily Hamburg,
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Here.
Mr. John Welch.
Present.
And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. This evening we have Sunrise Christian Academy Superintendent Dr. Rob Lindstead to lead us in prayer. Dr. Lindstead.
Good evening. I'd like to begin by reading Lamentations chapter 3, verses 22 through 25. It is because of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassion fails not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore will I hope in him. The Lord is good unto those who wait for him. Father God, we come to you tonight, and we thank you for your mercies that are new every morning. There's a number of blessings that we enjoy every morning. We thank you for the coolness of each day, each morning. And Father, we thank you for the protection that you give to our community, to our civil workers, our firemen, our policemen. Father, we pray for our civil servants, that you would continue to protect them, give them wisdom, we pray, as they make decisions. Father, we pray for our country as a whole, for our military, for our leaders. Father, we look at the world. Some are going through famine, some are going through wars, some are going through very difficult times, and we look around and you've blessed us greatly. We thank you for that. Father, we pray for our community as our families play during the summer, travel, vacation. Father, we pray that you'll keep us safe. And Father, we pray that we'll pause frequently to thank you, not only for your protection and your goodness, but Father, we thank you for sending your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, to the cross to die for our sins. Father, we thank you for his power and resurrection, for the salvation that we can have in him. We pray and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please join me in pledge of allegiance to the American flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is to determine agenda additions. Are there any additions to consider?
I don't have an addition, but I would like to remind everybody to silence their cell phones. I heard somebody's a minute ago.
All right. Thank you. Hearing none, I'll move on to the consent agenda. It contains only the minutes from the July 18th, 2023 regular city council meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Smith, a second by Mr. Welch. I think I heard somebody else as well, but he was good. Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Move on, discussion and approval of the appropriation ordinance. This reporting period included a payment to utility maintenance contractors in the amount of $30,800 for 22 new water service line installations. $494,755 was paid to Norwick Construction for Cedar Pass water and sewer main installations, and $206,000 went to the Bank of New York for CCUA expenses. Are there any questions concerning appropriations ordinance? Hearing none, I'll consider a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. David.
I'll make a motion to approve appropriations ordinance 23-14.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. David, a second by Mr. Dean. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. So we have Mr. David Floyd, served on the Planning Commission for 6 years and resigned this year due to family commitments. Planning Commission is a volunteer position, but provides a great service to the city and this council. So I'll ask David to join me at the podium. We were sorry to hear you leave, but we really appreciate your dedication and service. I know you're just a wonderful researcher and you know what you're talking about when you have to speak. So we really appreciate the years that you give to Bel Aire.
Thank you very
So
much.
in honor of that, we'll give you this plaque and a coin. Okay?
Well, I
You
appreciate
can't spend the
everything.
coin.
Yeah, well, I want to save it.
Oh, okay.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Next on the agenda is citizens' concerns. If there anyone here who wishes to speak to the council, we do need a card from you, which city clerk can help you with. And city clerk, did you have any cards other than the ones for the agenda item later? No, okay, thank you. Except for the agenda item 11A, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to council? Hearing none, we'll move on to council member reports. So, Mr. Dean, do you have a report?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few items. Just a reminder, Bel Aire Chamber Monthly Lunch is actually tomorrow. The director of the Kansas Aviation Museum is making a presentation. And also, just a friendly reminder, will not be here at the community center. It'll actually be at a different location, the Gospel Assembly Church. The meeting, which is at 4230 North Oliver, lunch and networking's at 11:30, meeting starts at noon. Also, another item that's coming up this week, it's a busy week. This Friday is the K254 Corridor Development Association meeting. Those are hosted every couple months. Keachai is hosting that this month at their City Hall community space. That meeting on Friday starts at 11:30. Another upcoming community event is National Night Out. Bel Aire Police Department is hosting that. That's on Friday, August 11th. It's a great event every year. It's just a way for their staff to engage with community. There'll be a lot of folks in attendance. So I welcome everybody in our community to attend. There should be, I think, some hot dogs and some snow cones and some good games and all that stuff too. I attended the Kansas chapter of the ASCE conference, which is civil engineers. Our city engineer, Ann, actually, and the rest of her planning committee on that group always does a great job putting that event on. First, I wanted to take the opportunity there to thank civil engineers. This profession is often overlooked and underappreciated, and it is an incredibly important role to public safety and the quality of life with critical infrastructure that they help to create: highways, streets, bridges, water, wastewater treatment, water, sewer, other underground utilities, along with dams, channels, and other waterways. As you can see, there's a lot, right? I could keep listing them, but these are all very important and critical items to society. So thank you, thank you, thank you, civil engineers. Also at the conference was Calvin Reed, KDOT secretary. He presented on several KDOT updates, which was nice. Also, I had a few minutes to visit with him personally and thank him for his efforts to support potential upcoming needs, and referred specifically to the meeting that our city manager and mayor had a chance to have several months back, and look forward to potential partnerships with KDOT. There's also presentations on K96 expansion. And the last thing I'd like to say about the conference was the city administrator from the city of DeSoto presented on the Panasonic project. They talked a lot about infrastructure, all the work that they have going on to support the growth in their community, but also their community's commitment to keeping a small town feel. It was pretty amazing. I mean, he broke out the costs to specific infrastructure, and I'm going to read these, so hold tight with me. 60 million for roads, 47 million for water treatment, 30 million for sewer treatment, 20 million for sewer lines, 9 million for water tower, 12 million for fire station. That totals $178 million worth of infrastructure improvements that are happening in and around DeSoto to support that project. So certainly interesting to see and learn from somebody that's going through some significant challenges, and I really appreciate his presentation on it. So that's all I had.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. David.
Mr. Mayor, I attended the CCUA meeting last Thursday where the good news was we had no effluent overages. We were compliant again. And even despite one influent overage. So that was a good month. We approved the 2024 budget, which was 20%, over 20% more than the 2023. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also attended the CCUA meeting on the 27th. The only thing that I'll add is that the CCUA did receive an update on Bel Aire's progress installing sampling meters at our lift stations as Bel Aire continues to work to implement the pre-treatment program. And so that's great progress from the city of Bel Aire, putting in those samplers so that we can show that heavy discharge is not coming from the city of Bel Aire. And if we do detect some, that we can take care of that and work that through the pre-treatment program. Spent probably an hour discussing the budget. It took a lot to get to that budget at the CCUA meeting. The big contentious factor was so the board members from Park City really wanted to budget over $100,000 in legal expenses in the anticipation of being fined by KDHE, which we've had no indication from KDHE that they intend to fine us or will fine us. And so we spent a great amount of time discussing that. And we did end up in a compromise budgeting $75,000 for it, which I voted against because I think it's unneeded. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Welch.
I have no report.
Ms. Hamburg.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the public hearing for Evergy's proposed rate hike on Thursday evening. I hung in for a little over 2 hours. I checked back on YouTube and it was well over 4 hours. Obviously, a lot of people are concerned about it. It's outside the scope of my report to go into all the details, but when when Westar merged with KC P&L 5 years ago, they were not allowed to raise hikes for 5 years. And now they're that's over. They've made some investments to make the service more reliable, and with a few other items for why they're proposing the hike. It was very educational. If you don't know why Evergy enjoys a monopoly, you can get on YouTube and watch the entire presentation, and then public comment is available at the KCC website until September 29th. The average rate hike, this is the average for the average homeowner, is looking to be roughly $14 if it goes through. So if you want to make your voice heard on that, log on until September 29th. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the mayor's report. So some good news, actually very good news. Our council member Tyler Dean kept working with USD 259 to concerning a issue with school buses for the children along Woodlawn that's still under construction. The 259 had decided they were going to stop the bus service and not have it for the fall semester. Well, Woodlawn's going to be under construction at least until October, November timeframe. So we can fully expect that service to stop in the spring semester. It's going to be reinstated for the fall semester. The school district did agree to do that. So thank you, Tyler, for your staying on top of the issue. This is great news for the safety of Bel Aire kids. So last Thursday, 27th, was a busy day for me. I started the day meeting with Rick Walker, who is the mayor of DeSoto, Kansas. I learned about things DeSoto is doing in preparation for the Panasonic battery plant is being planned to be built there. I was not aware of his city administrator presenting. So both of those gentlemen are engineers by trade, so that's kind of an interesting thing. But it was a very good meeting and learned a lot, and I've discussed that with Mr. Lasher. I drove back to Bel Aire in time for this Chisholm Creek Utility Authority meeting, and we approved the budget, as other members have said. From my perspective, there is no reason to have a contingency for those costs. No one is planning to not maintain compliance with KDHE license for effluent. So this was a compromise. Instead of $150,000 contingency, we settled on $75,000, but still unnecessary budget amount that should never be spent. And after the CCA meeting, I did also go to the KCC hearing at Evergy rate increase. And I pointed out that the $14 per month increase for each household will result in increases in taxes also. So the proposal is also for 25% increases for churches, schools, and municipalities. And if these are approved, Bel Aire, our schools, and every other city in the rate area will have to collect more taxes to pay that Evergy bill. Churches will need additional donations to continue their same level of charitable work in their communities. Additionally, Evergy is proposing phasing out 2 coal-fired plants at the same time, and they say that they are short on generating capacity. So they want to charge the ratepayers for unrealized depreciation for those coal-fired plants. I pointed out that their analysis shows that the alternative to these plants is more cost effective, then that is where they should get the savings and should not be charging the ratepayers. And if their analysis shows that the alternatives are more expensive, they should not be closing those plants. So KCC has until the end of the year to make a decision on this. They have public input, as Ms. Hamburg had pointed out, and they have a schedule of events between now and December to get things done on this rate increase. They also have filed for another rate increase also. So there's one piggybacking right behind this one. So please continue to support businesses along Woodlawn during the construction. They are moving along, but we have to endure it for a few more months. I did notice today that the Quail Creek intersection is open, so you can drive down there. It looks like it's going to be very soon. We're going to have two-way traffic again, so that would be fantastic. So I'm going to ask our city attorney for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I continue to review agreements on a regular basis. I am reviewing policies, trying to figure out which ones need to be updated, looking at document updates. I'm responding to citizen questions, and I attended a training seminar last week in Kansas City.
Very
good, thank you. Mr. Lasher, our
Yes,
city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Wanted to congratulate Garrett Weichman. He received Employee of the Quarter for the second quarter. He was nominated by his coworkers for his willingness to accommodate some staff changes, preparing some new offices, some work around City Hall that he's done. He's also our code enforcement officer. So we want to thank him for prioritizing people and fostering inclusion in the workplace. So congratulate him. Couple more events that are going on to tag on to what Councilmember Dean was talking about. We've got the Bel Aire Ball at the Rec Center is coming up August 4th, 6:30 to 8:30. So it's $20 for an adult and a child, and then $5 for each guest. So they are requiring pre-registration. So if anybody wants to go, get a hold of the Rec Center. The Hot Dogs Pool Party is coming up on August 7th at the Bel Aire Central Park Pool. So that's the last day that the pool will be open and the dogs get to enjoy it. There's two groups. Group 1, which is the small or calm dogs from 6 to 6:50. And then group 2 will be 6:50 to 8. And that's the bigger dogs or the active dogs. So works good when you divide them up. And then just a little bit about Bel Aire by the numbers, some growth that's taking place and what our staff is busy doing. So as far as active meters in Bel Aire to date, or as of July, we have 3,773 meters. That's up 24% from last year. So that's the kind of growth you mentioned in your report, Mayor, the added cost for meters, and that's why every month you've got meter costs in the appropriation ordinance. As far as total bills that we send out, for July, we were at 3,800. That's a 25% increase from last July. And then this is the staggering number, move in and move outs when people sell or changing rentals. To date, we're at 1,170, and that's up from 790 last year, 600 the year before. So that's a 48% increase. So
That's the amount. That's why when we come and talk about how our staff is very busy, you can see by those numbers, and it shows the growth that we're incurring here in Bel Aire. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Those are amazing numbers. I was not aware of that. So, great. So we'll move on to ordinance resolutions and final actions. The first item under section 11 is A, and this is an agenda, this reference to zoning case number ZON 23-01. This is for a rezoning amendment requested, a change from AG to M1 industrial property. And it's located at the southeast corner of K254 and Rock Road. Before I proceed, I'll ask the city council if any of them intends to disqualify themselves from participating in this matter due to a conflict of interest.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean.
just a clarification. Thank you. I am not disqualifying myself. I wanted to make a clarification, though. I wanted to disclose that I did attend the July 13th, 2023 Bel Aire Planning Commission public meeting. I did not address the commission nor speak during the meeting, and have not discussed that vote or our upcoming vote with anyone on Planning Commission or City Council. I attended the meeting purely to observe and gather additional information on zoning case ZON-23-01 that comes before us tonight. My observations of that meeting is it was very orderly. Everyone was respectful that spoke, those for or against the zoning change, and I hope that that can continue tonight. In addition, Planning Commission was very thoughtful and thoroughly deliberated, and staff did a great job presenting as well. I want to thank everyone that worked hard and was diligent on the request. I too have also read the information in our packet and look forward to hearing any additional comments and presentations to consider during our discussions and decisions here tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So let's
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith. I'm sorry.
I'd
I
like to
didn't
make
want
a
anybody-
motion to go into executive session for the purposes of legal advice pursuant to the KSA 754-319 exception for attorney-client privilege, inviting the city manager and city attorney and special counsel. The
Okay.
meeting will be for a period of 5 minutes, and the open meeting will resume at 7:27 p.m.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
I have a motion going executive session for 5 minutes, past 4-1. So we are in executive session for 5 minutes, and I assume we'll go in the back room to have that. So we will be back in 5 minutes. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We have about a minute left on the clock, but understand we can go on and proceed, so we'll do that. So we asked if anybody was going to disqualify themselves, and I did get a firm answer from everybody that no one is disqualifying themselves. So let the record reflect that a quorum of the city council members present from for the consideration of this case, and none have disqualified themselves. So including in our packet are copies of unapproved minutes for the Planning Commission meeting on July 13th, 2023, which summarizes the public hearing on the case. Did all council members receive their packet with this information?
Yes.
Okay. Appears that everyone is affirming that they have received that packet and have had a chance to review that. So having determined that members have received the required information, I ask for a motion to receive and file the draft Planning Commission minutes for our records. May I have
Mr.
a
Mayor.
motion? Ms. Hamburg.
I'm going to make a motion to receive and file those minutes from the Planning Commission.
Second. Second. Motion by Ms. Hamburg and a second by Mr. David. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. So we received an opportunity to have an opportunity to review the complete summary of the Planning Commission's hearing and includes the minutes, the findings and factors of the support its recommendations. I understand by law that we are not obligated to conduct another public hearing. Accordingly, I will ask the applicant and any of the public who may wish to speak on this matter to limit their presentation to any new information and not otherwise presented in the Planning Commission hearing that should be brought to the attention of the City Council. The City Council may also want to direct questions to the applicant, our staff, and legal counsel or others present. So I'll first call Mr. Jay Cook, our Director of Planning and Development, to provide us with the report on the case and recommendations for Planning Commission.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, before Mr. Cook makes his presentation, would there be a question if there have been any ex parte communications with any members?
Yes, we will cover that momentarily. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't want to put you all through the whole process we did with the Planning Commission, but I did want you to see the presentation that was given. There's a little bit of different information in here that pertains more to you than the Planning Commission. We're here to talk about a proposed rezoning of approximately 63 acres, currently zoned ag, to a planned unit development M1. This 63 acres was annexed into the city of Bel Aire on May 22nd of 2003 by Ordinance 392 and was zoned agriculture as a holding zone for land where future urban expansion is possible. Planning Commission held the required public hearing as stated for the zone change request on July the 13th. Planning Commission received public comments from citizens both in favor and in opposition to the zone change. In your staff report that I provided prior to the public hearing, we were contacted, staff, city manager and myself, by 3 individuals via email in support of the zoning change. We were also given written communication from a member of the Heritage Hill subdivision with titled Alternative Proposed Findings of Fact that the Planning Commission was given at the meeting as well. As stated there that I gotta turn this thing on. That we received some written correspondence. So the question for the Planning Commission was, is the zoning change of the subject property a reasonable and acceptable request based on the proposed land use? Again, in your staff report, we had the staff's findings of fact, which is the golden factors used in zoning changes, as well as in red what the Planning Commission denoted, added to the debate in the conversation. So we start with the legal considerations for you all. So all the conditions precedent to the council's consideration of this request have been satisfied. That is the notification of the individuals in the notification area required by state law, and also the publication in the Ark Valley News. The clerk will mention this as well soon, but a valid protest petition was filed within the statutory 14-day period from a public hearing. The protest petition changes the voting threshold to approval to require a 75% majority approval. So in accordance with state law and our city code, you have one of the following options or actions tonight when considering adoption of the requested zone change with the protest petition filed. If you were to go in favor to adopt the recommendation of the Planning Commission and approve the zone change, that requires 75% vote, which would be five votes. To override the recommendation of the Planning Commission would take a 2/3 majority vote, and disapprove the zone change, that would be 4 votes. It's important to note that if this option is selected, the City Council must adopt findings of fact in support of that, in support of taking of disapproving the zone change. The third option you have is to return the recommendation to the Planning Commission with a statement specifying the basis for your failure to approve or disapprove. This is actually a simple majority, but that should say 4 votes. That's my apology. It's right on your staff report. I just hit the wrong key on the PowerPoint here. But to go over a little bit of what I went over with the Planning Commission is the findings of fact. What are those? And of course, those are the golden factors that were decided in the Golden versus Overland Park Supreme Court, Kansas Supreme Court case in 1970 something. And the first 6 of these were the actual enumerated factors that the majority opinion decided that the Planning Commission should consider when considering a zoning change. The purpose of this is to make sure that zoning changes are not just an arbitrary decision, but are based on some type of fact. So we had the character of the neighborhood, zoning nearby, suitability of the subject property for which it's been restricted, the extent to which removal of those restrictions may detrimentally affect other properties, nearby properties, the length of time the subject property remained vacant, and the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare by which destruction of value of the applicant's property as compared to the hardship on other individual owners. That's quite a bit, but this is the reason why we zone, is for the public health, safety, and welfare. Those are the 6 enumerated factors that were provided in the Golden versus Overland Park. The last 3, 2 of those were recommended to be considered. One is in our city code, which is why we have a total of 9. The conformance with comprehensive plan and the recommendation of professional staff is something the Supreme Court decided probably should be considered. And then property owner opinions is something we have in our city code. And it's good to have that, in my opinion, to know what the surrounding neighbors think about it. To start, wanted to show you the subject property. This was described at the southeast corner of Highway 254 and Rock Road. Quick character of the neighborhood. This is just the areas surrounding the subject property that are south of Highway 254. When you do, professional planners will tell you that typically the line of a neighborhood is a major highway. So we decided that the best way to look at the character of this neighborhood was to stay south of Highway 254. And what we have in that, you have agriculture, institutional, commercial, some mixed use. There's some residential multifamily, but due to the location and what's around it, it seems like a good prospect for large mixed use due to its peripheral to the city limits and its proximity to Highway 254. This factor, the Planning Commission did not disagree with any of the staff's finding on this. They added that the property is agriculture, but was always intended for M1 since its acquisition. The Planning Commission also stated they understand that the degrees and the differences of zoning going from this residential property to an M1 PUD, or the way this is, seems relatively close, or it is close. They do take that into consideration. The Planning Commission decided the factor marginally favors rezoning, even with acknowledging the closeness of the low density housing to the left to the property. So that factor, they decided it was in favor of the zoning change. I wanted to give you a little bit of the zoning of the nearby properties. I have no idea where to point this. Okay. So this is just a little table here, the direction, zoning classification, and what the land use is. So north into Sedgwick County, it's all agriculture. There's a map I'll show you in a second that shows all this. You also have it in your staff report. The land uses for it is mainly farming and ranch use. South and southeast in the Bel Aire side, you have C1 neighborhood commercial, office and retail, R3 single family residential, R5 garden and patio homes, townhouses and condominiums. So the land uses for those lots are apartments, an office, some condominiums, and the Northeast Magnet School. To the east of the subject property, which is all in Bel Aire, is the M1, zoned M1 for a planned unit development. Right now that does sit vacant, but this is the final piece of the 4 that was intended for the development to start. On the west side and northwest, which is into Keachai, you have R1 single family residential, C3 heavy commercial, and I1 industrial, where you have the land uses are single family, North Point Center, commercial, and KDOT. And this is a map representing those. So north in Bel Aire and Sedgwick County, you have to the north is agriculture. We do have some agriculture on all the Sedgwick County sides that are adjacent to the city of Bel Aire. Here's your M1, some mixed use. This is the R3 residential, where the Northeast Magnet High School is. The high school was put there with a conditional use. It is a conditional use item. And it was done so to alleviate some of the issues that our commercial zonings require for landscaping and things like that, to save taxpayers some money on added things they would have had to have done. And then you have a couple of R5 zoned areas that we've recently platted, commercial, and then this is Sunflower Commerce Park. The next slide I have is the zoning of Keachai, which is what I tried to do was go the same distances around to show the nearby zonings. This is a little different than how we define a neighborhood when we're talking about what is nearby. So as far southeast as I went, I also wanted you to see what was northwest of the subject property. So subject property, this is Keachai zoning map from their website. This is the subject property. You have R1. This is the North Point Center commercial, this red, and then KDOT with some R2 multifamily in there as well. So we wanted to kind of give you a bit of a radius of the property as far as the zoning goes. So the next golden factor is the suitability of the subject property for the uses to which it's been restricted. How is the property currently zoned? These are things that the Planning Commission considered. The property is currently zoned ag, which is intended to maintain and enhance agriculture operations. We have some of the permitted uses for the agriculture district. This becomes relevant in a little bit with some other of the golden factors So the question you have that we try to answer is not as only is this piece of property suitable for the zoning that has been restricted, which a 63-acre piece of property in Kansas is probably suitable for agriculture. I don't think anybody would deny that. But the question is that the law does not require that the subject property be totally unsuitable, but it is sufficient that a substantial decrease in value results from a classification bearing no substantial relation to the public welfare. So this is where property rights kind of come into play. It is suitable for agriculture as any large plot would be, but is it suitable for what the property owner may want to use it for? And is there not a more suitable use, but another suitable use that we can argue is a reasonable request, which is what we're trying to do. So that with the proximity to 254 and other arterial roads and the growth of the city, Planning Commission, again, with this one, did not disagree with staff's findings and added that given the history of the city's purchase, it was always expected to be commercial, and that this factor strongly favors rezoning. It should be weighted pretty heavily. The next one is extent to which removal of the restrictions will detrimentally affect nearby property. Can the uses allowed be good neighbors to existing development? This is something we always want to consider, especially with as you get a little bit more intense in the densities of the zoning, is can this be a good neighbor to the properties? And staff put together that because of this is an M1 request, a PUD is required. There is a lot of staff input. There's a lot of Planning Commission input. There's a lot of council input in this to make sure that we can encourage whoever or whatever business may come in to be a good neighbor through landscaping requirements, through screening requirements, buffers, things of that nature, to make sure that we are encouraging a good neighborly development. So to go along with what staff had given, Planning Commission again did not disagree with staff's findings, and they said that this factor actually strongly favors a zoning change, and any concerns with traffic or otherwise can be addressed in the PUD process. The next question is the length of time that the property has remained vacant as zoned. So the property is currently vacant. It's been vacant since it was annexed in 2003. We own the city owned the property for 20 years with no legitimate offers for purchase during that time. The land was available for purchase but remained vacant. Again, the Planning Commission didn't disagree with this and strongly recommended rezoning. That ag was a placeholder in this case, and although this should not be weighted as heavy as other factors, it's still important. One of the things that I stated earlier about the permitted uses in agriculture is, can you consider a piece of property vacant? Is it being used for the permitted uses that we had on a previous slide? And I'll go back to that slide that has the permitted uses. So the permitted uses, there's no crops, livestock, animal specialties. There's no quarry, mining, oil production. There's no houses on it. There are a couple structures, but they've been vacant for 20 years as well. So this staff determined that this would make this property considered vacant, and the Planning Commission did not disagree with that fact. Moving on to the next one, the relative gain to public health, safety, and welfare by destruction of value of the applicant's property as compared to the hardship on other individual landowners. This is the primary purpose for zoning and cities having the authority and the ability to zone. If successfully developed into an industrial project, the city will gain a significant number of local high-paying jobs, which will attract additional residents and promote surrounding development of other commercial, retail, and residential development. We can anticipate the effects of property values. Staff can't, property owner can't, agent can't. It's just not something that can be done. Property values may increase, they may decrease. There's no way to tell. The Planning Commission didn't disagree with this one either. And they actually think that this factor strongly favors the change and is very important for the future of the city. This is the opportunity for the city of Bel Aire to go from a bit of a more of a bedroom community to a full-scale, full-service city, is the way the Planning Commission viewed that. So conformance to the comprehensive plan, there's a bit of that in your staff report if you want some more information on it. The vision map that was adopted by the governing body in 2014 has the subject property as commercial use. It was staff's opinion, as well as the Planning Commission not disagreeing with this, that increasing that from a commercial use to an M1 PUD is not an unreasonable jump as far as zonings go. Also, with the conformance to the comprehensive plan, you can see in your staff report, there's some goals and objectives that the comprehensive plan laid out, focusing higher impact developments on the peripheral of the city. That's the northwest point of the city as of right now. Maximize revenue generated from developments which will provide the most return for investment. Staff believe the PUD is a perfect opportunity for that, and the Planning Commission did not disagree. Planning Commission stated that this favors approval, and although commercial set forth in the plan is not exactly industrial, the concerns and degree change can be addressed with the PUD. Property owner opinions, again, this is important to us. We enjoy feedback. An initial public hearing was held prematurely on May 11th. We got some good insight in that meeting about concerns with traffic, safety, lighting, property values. Subsequently, a protest petition was given. You all have had access to that, filed on May the 24th, which addressed some of those factors that are different than what the staff and the Planning Commission had. While the residential property owners have offered opposition, staff believes most concerns can be addressed properly through the PUD. That's the important aspect of that. Planning Commission didn't disagree that the factor is marginal and could lean either way, because you have some in favor and some not. The residential property owner's opinion is recognized to be mostly opposed, but concerns are outweighed by other factors. And then the recommendations of professional staff is the last golden factor that was discussed. Based on the preceding findings of fact, the staff recommended approval. And in addition to that, the Planning Commission stated that professional staff has a history of doing the right thing as the development stage occurs with PUD and other planning. We have I believe, city manager and I agree that we've got a great staff with engineering, and my building inspector, myself, really coming together, making sure we're providing the best opinions on the PUD as it comes through. The infrastructure concern, particularly traffic, is marginal, but this still favors the zone change. And this, so I showed you the comprehensive plan. This is actually Bel Aire master plan that you all, or the governing body, signed into in 2018. Sorry, where the entirety of that area was foreseen in both the balance scenario and a job growth scenario as potential large-scale mixed use or commercial. That's tough to read through there, but that's what that is. And again, the Bel Aire PUD process. So this is where we take a site plan that accommodates. We got to make sure the site accommodates building, parking areas, drives, appropriate open space. That the plan is consistent with good land planning. We require landscaping, screening, parking and internal traffic is designed to promote safety. The plan is consistent with our comprehensive plan, and the architectural style should be appropriate for the project. So that was our discussion. And if you have any questions for me regarding that meeting or what, any questions at all, I'd be happy to entertain those now.
Well, thank you for the presentation. And does anyone have questions for our Director of Planning and Development?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
just a follow-up question as you walked through the PUD requirements. For those watching, can you talk about the PUD process and what are the steps that will be followed, since some of the comments that you provided reference the PUD as a significant mitigation factor?
Yes. And that's a very good question. So the PUD process is once a property is zoned in a way that they need a PUD, they then provide a site plan. That site plan that they're providing to the city in larger scale has multiple factions to it. We're going over a drainage plan with engineering. We're looking at does it meet Bel Aire's code on landscaping, screening, as far as the building size and the site? Can it, like I said, can it accommodate that size? So that process goes through probably a lot of staff. Ty will look at it, Maria, myself, Keith, my building inspector, as well as Ann, will all be looking through the plan that is presented to us. Once the plan is presented to us and we see, ask for any type of changes or see anything that may need to be amended or what have you, then that goes before the Planning Commission. And then the Planning Commission has say in make sure everything is there and the requirements are met, and that approval goes to them and then eventually to you. So you will eventually have a sign off on the site plan to make sure everything is reasonable.
So if this process moves forward and the PUD is put in place and then the developer comes back and they're planning to do something with this site that maybe is something that wouldn't be appropriate for the area, the way that they're planning to go about the project would have a significant detrimental effect to the character of the neighborhood or to the surrounding property values, that could just be stopped by staff. It could just be stopped by Planning Commission, or ultimately it would be stopped by City Council. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
A good example would be a plant that may have some type of discharge, something bad for the environment, discharge or something, we can always say no.
Very good. Any other questions for Mr. Cook? Very quiet. So our city attorney reminded me that I needed to ask if any council members had any ex parte communications with anyone on this matter. And I do need to disclose that I did have an ex parte communication with one of the Planning Commission members. Just happened to ran across them Saturday night as my wife and I were having dinner. And he shared just a couple of things from the Planning Commission meeting. It didn't sway me any way, one way or the other. I'd only done a preliminary review and I did some more review after that, but it was there. So I just wanted to disclose that. Anyone else have any similar ex parte communications they need to disclose?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Very similar communication on my part with the Planning Commission member who shared some thoughts about the meeting and the proceedings, engaged in some brief discussion like I do with anyone that wants to talk with me about a city issue. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. David.
Likewise, on Planning Commission member discussion and Neighborhood Association member discussions. So I've heard from both sides. So I've been neutral and hearing all sides.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Welch.
I actually ran into a planning commissioner at the dinner one night, and the only thing we really said was that he appreciated how well the public and everybody acted at the zoning meeting. He didn't try to sway one way or the other on what we should do.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I've had no ex parte
Okay.
communication outside of my own household, the
Okay.
person I'm married to. Thank you. And it
They
didn't
didn't-
sway my,
they didn't
it
try to
did not
sway you?
sway my opinion.
Your kids are not that persuasive, huh? Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean.
and I believe I covered mine earlier, just having been
Yes.
present in the planning commission meeting, but
Yeah.
I remained open-minded and as an observer, and that's all I have.
All right, very good. Well, thank you. All right. We will now ask the clerk if there are any written communications or protest petitions on this matter.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so in addition to some emails that we did receive in support of the rezoning, we also received a written protest petition, which city staff found to be sufficient and which was filed within 14 days of the Planning Commission's public hearing on the matter. And all of that information was provided to you in your packet.
Very good. Thank you. Before we ask if there's any new information, especially in light of the protest petition, is there anything city manager wishes to add?
So I just wanted to, you have a unique role tonight that you're playing. You are acting as a quasi judicial role tonight. So what that means is that you are a non-judicial body, which is the city council, but you're interpreting laws or the ordinances and codes of the city and the ordinances and state statutes. So quasi-judicial action is when the facts of a particular situation, in this case a zone change, are being applied to policy, which are the zoning codes. So the standard of review which applies to quasi-judicial decisions is much less differential. It's based on entirely the record of proceedings before the city council. Courts will look at three things. They look at whether there was competent, substantial evidence to support the decision, whether the city council observed the essential requirements of law, and whether procedural due process was provided. So you will and are doing those three things tonight. So as you've already heard, a protest petition was filed. Those are allowed under Kansas statute 12-747, as well as the Bel Aire zoning codes. The protest petition requires at least 20% or more of the owners of record within the required notification be filed within 14 days, and that was found valid. The protest petition requires a zone change be approved by a 3/4 majority of the governing body. So for Bel Aire, that's 5 of the 6. That's the only consideration of that protest petition. There was a lot of things that were said in there, but this is the only requirement that comes out of that protest petition. Oops. So we've already talked about that, but there are 4 different actions that you can take tonight, and that's on your agenda as you consider this. So you can accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Again, the protest petition requires a 75% majority or 5 votes. You can override the Planning Commission, which is a simple 2/3 majority, or 4 votes. You can, by a 75% majority, you can revise and then approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission. So again, that would take 5 votes to do that. Or you could return the recommendation back to the Planning Commission with a 2/3 majority. But you'd need to give specific reasons why you're returning it to them, what it is you want them to consider. So that is your role tonight as a quasi-judicial board. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for the information. So this brings us to the applicant's presentation. Does the applicant wish to present any new information?
Good evening, Phil Meyer with Baughman Company, agent for the applicant. I have no new additional information that we need to present. I think staff's done a thorough job. I'll be glad either now or anytime during the hearing to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant from the council members? Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Does anyone from the public wish to provide us with any new information? As a reminder, presentation time will be limited to not more than 3 minutes. We will have information from the Planning Commission hearing, so we are mostly interested in new information. So when I call your name, please go to the podium. Please give your name and address for the record and share any new information that was not shared in the Planning Commission meeting. So the first person I have here is Mr. Gary Hawley. And because this is recorded, we appreciate your speaking into the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, gentle council members. It's an exciting time, growth opportunity for the city, county, and certainly the state. It's
Excuse me,
also,
sir, did you give your address?
oh, I'm sorry,
Name
Gary
and address.
Hawley, 7730 East Millstream Road, Keachai,
Thank you.
in the Heritage Hills subdivision. This is also, understandably, I hope that you can understand, an anxious time for us in that Heritage Hills division and what potentially that property will be used for. A quick point of disagreement or contention from the Planning Commission report from the recent July meeting. The additional Planning Commission comments on the Golden Factor 1 on the character of the neighborhood is that area had always been considered for M1 in the Bel Aire growth plan, but in the 2014 Bel Aire master growth plan, the area was actually planned for mixed residential and commercial use. There were two alternative plans that were found in the appendix of that plan. One plan is for medium residential with a small slice of mixed commercial facing 254. The second alternative plan was for a mixed commercial in that area, but there were no plans that were identified for M1 in that area, nor did they appear to be in the plans for M1 that's currently on the website that's now zoned as M1. Mr. Cook did a very good, thorough job in his presentation putting together the information between the May and July meetings, and we appreciated the work that he did in clarifying a lot of points and questions that we had. He discussed tonight that the change from the ag to commercial zoning is allowed, and this is supported in the Bel Aire growth plan from 2013-14. However, the zoning changes and use of the surrounding areas that are listed in the growth plan, M1 zoning around residential zoning areas was not allowed. There's a graphic on page 15 of that growth plan that would not allow M1 around residential areas. Those are all my comments of information just to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mr. Dean Kuckelman.
Dean Kuckelman, 7735 East Oak Tree Lane. I want to start out, this is not new. This is old. I said this last time, but it's important, I think, to say it again. I believe that Integra will be a good neighbor, and I'm not opposed to having them. And I'm up here, and the reason I signed the protest petition was to protect my legal rights as a property owner if that doesn't go through as planned. So I want to make that clear. So far, they've been fabulous. I want to start out with the city manager pointing out this is supposed to be a quasi-judicial process, and one of the requirements is procedural due process. So for Mr. Cook to have 25 minutes and slides, and for me to have 3 minutes, does not feel like procedural due process. And I hope that the protest petition will be considered as part of the record because that's where the detail is. I will address the new things, and I've got to talk fast because I asked for more than 3 minutes. And my request is denied. Again, I don't think that's consistent with procedural due process, but I'll do my best to try to get it in. The previous speaker did a great job explaining the factual dispute about character of the neighborhood and that it's always been intended for M1 since its acquisition. One of the requirements that you have to have is that there has to be competent, substantial evidence. There hasn't been any evidence presented that that was the original intention, and there was evidence here to the contrary. Maybe more importantly is legally, it doesn't matter what the intention was at the time of the purchase, because at the time of the purchase by Bel Aire, Golden versus Overland Park had already been decided in 1978, decades before. And maybe more importantly, Heritage Hill, the rural residential, was already there, along with the agriculture owned by Mr. Burkamp. So to say that it was intended for M1 when it was bought just means you shouldn't have bought it if that was the intention, because you can't meet the other golden factors. That same argument applies to the zoning. Extent to which removal of the restrictions will detrimentally affect nearby property. So in this case, it's just being misapplied, legally being misapplied. The question here is, how will removal of the restrictions detrimentally affect the nearby property? It's not an answer to say that the PUD will fix it. The question is, and the golden factor is, the removal of the restrictions by the rezoning, not if there's a PUD to make it better. The other factor about suitability of the subject property for the uses to which it has been restricted, everybody concedes that this is suitable for agriculture. Another factor about vacancy, there's a question about, is the property really vacant? One of the uses allowed under agriculture is livestock. And again, no substantial evidence has been presented that it has been vacant, that it hasn't been used by livestock. In fact, I've seen cattle there, definitely since Bel Aire bought the land. Livestock is one of the appropriate agricultural uses. It just simply has not been vacant. And so,
Mr. Kuckelman, timer went off. So how much more time are you going to need to wrap up?
Within a minute.
Okay.
Thank you. Golden factor number 6, relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare by destruction of value of the applicant's property. So that factor has not been applied correctly, and not factual issue, just legally. So the question there is, if the permit is denied, how will that destroy the applicant's value of the property? And there hadn't been any evidence about that. All of the evidence, all of the discussion has been about how much additional value there will be if it's granted. I didn't get through everything, but let me just close with this. The PUD has been sort of a promised panacea to resolve all of our neighborhood concerns. And I hope that that turns out to be true. I hope that when this process, if this process gets to the next step and we're in the PUD process, that all of you who will have a say in that will remember that that was part of the condition, not necessarily a legal condition, but that was basically represented that by everyone here, that the PUD would be an important part that would protect our property values so that we're not detrimentally affected. I appreciate the extra time.
Okay. Thank you. Next, I have Susan Hawley.
Thank you. My name is Suzanne Hawley, 7730 East Millstream Road, Keachai, Kansas, Heritage Hill neighborhood. I would ask that you, I humbly ask that you consider overriding the Planning Commission vote. Today is not a vote for a PUD. Today is a permanent, very extremely difficult to reverse vote on zoning, and anybody can fit the criteria to try to use that zoning that meets the manufacturing requirements, which N1, as you know, was never discussed in any public document related to Bel Aire's future, and has only talked about, quote, limited commercial, mixed-use commercial in that area. And the difficulty I think I have, aside from just having 3 minutes, is that while Mr. Cook did a nice job presenting in favor of zoning approval, the maps were very selected to the areas that would be in favor of that. What was not shown was all of the west side of Rock and going all the way south, all the way to 37th Street. When you look at how we functionally interact in a neighborhood, that is based on your street. where cars go about. And so that's Rock Road neighborhood. The M1 industrial zoning that just happened is on the Webb Road, which we all know is more commercial industrial. But Rock Road is primarily residential, and there is 0% M1 zoning and limited commercial zoning on that entire neighborhood that goes all the way down to 45th and passes Bel Aire to 37th Street. So I think that that lack of information and not being able to have time to show that. I've talked to realtors that have been here for decades, have said if you live directly adjacent where they have to legally inform you to come and know that there's a hearing, manufacturing, that's going to detrimentally decrease the value of your home. And when you have 2,500 new employees that are expected in the Integra project, then that's factually researched that it's going to increase traffic, it's going to increase safety, it's going to increase crime, it's going to increase a lot of things that are going to detrimentally affect the residents who have been here before that was all planned. Unfortunately, I don't know why Keachai is kind of grayed out. I mean, it just hasn't been a concern because we're not part of your boundary, but we are living, breathing, meaningful people who have put our life savings in all of those houses and have lived there for before Rock Road was even paved. So I hope that you would consider the importance of this vote, which is not a PUD. This vote is for M1, which can mean anything. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, the last card I have is for Ryan Hendricks.
Hi, I'm Ryan Hendricks. I live at 7620 East Oak Tree Lane. And I gave my speech at the Planning Commission, and I don't want to have to repeat it. I just kind of gave my concerns and my history of being here over 30 years. We built our house there 30 years ago. I knew the farmer that lived there. I did work with him. I kept horses on his land. That was Vernon. And I hunted a lot of doves on that pond right across the road. And my concern is for my neighbors along the road. I live on top, but they're my neighbors and I'm concerned for them. I'm not concerned with Integra. They brought us in, Brett Robinson, Matt Cortez, the architect. Brett's the CEO and the developer, Steve. And what they showed us and what they gave us was, we prefer it. We know something's going to go there. I don't want a Chick-fil-A. I don't want a McDonald's. They're going to have almost a campus, but you're asking us to gamble. It's a gamble because they may not get the funding. And I'm happy with what they showed us, and I would look forward to that. Something though that does kind of bother me, and it kind of has to do with Woodlawn. It's taking too long. It's messed up Rock Road. Rock Road's not structurally, it can't handle traffic that well. It has no shoulders. 53rd Street's not that great. The infrastructure is going to have to improve. And I'm hoping that maybe if this does go through, if the funding from the federal government comes in for them, that you guys will get that infrastructure done and do it in a timely fashion, and especially KDOT. Get that done in a timely fashion. But it's kind of up to you. We can't really, we don't have a lot of power in this, but we just want you to know our concerns was traffic and safety, and that Integra or something like it goes in and not something that's going to hamper or endanger us and the infrastructure itself. But thank you, and consider our feelings, please.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That was the last card I have. Are there any other members of the public that did not turn in a card who would like to share anything new? Seeing no further speakers, I'm going to hereby close the public comment session. And we now have heard from the city manager concerning options for action provided under state statutes of the city council for the city council. And there are any questions for the city manager or the city attorney regarding these choices?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
I have a question for Mr. Cook. So in regards to the PUD process, the M1 zoning
Mhm.
applies to the parcel, and then the developer who's here tonight, if they continue to move forward, will submit this site plan as you described, and then that whole process starts. What happens if between the time this zone change is approved and 5 years from now nothing has happened, nothing gets built on that property as zoned M1 with PUD, and it gets sold to someone else? What are the options for somebody who buys that property?
The individual who would buy the property would have the option of maintaining the zoning as an M1, possibly building or bringing in something to the city to develop. They could also rezone. There's nothing permanent about a zoning change. Obviously, we do them every few months. We have a zoning change, so they could, if they wanted to buy that, excuse me, wanted to buy that piece of property and put in another housing development, they would be more than welcome to apply for the zoning change, and we could see if it, passed the golden factors test as well, and go that route. I mean, there's a lot of options. If in your scenario, if nothing happens on that piece of property, a lot can change. It can happen. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is, could they build on it without going through a PUD process? Is there anything that could be built there without a PUD? Given
No,
this change?
once you've zoned something M1 with the PUD, a site plan has to be presented before you can break ground on anything.
Okay.
So technically speaking, you can't put a shovel into the ground unless the city has had ample time and given approval to review what is being requested, what is being done.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
even I would say even as far as site preparation, we still have to have something before anything gets started. So there won't be any surprises, I guess. That's the best way to answer your question. There would be no.
Yeah, I mean, I heard some concerns tonight about, hey, what if the planned development that we've heard about doesn't go through? I think that's a really valid concern.
It is.
And so I kind of wanted to understand, what that would look like, because, as I've thought about this and considered the golden factors, looking at the character of the neighborhood, it's right next to a highway. And so farmland doesn't, seem appropriate for a permanent use there. Something's going to be built there that's not farmland. That's been in master plans for a long time. And it does seem like the way that this developer is thinking about developing that site with a PUD is probably appropriate for that parcel. But zoning can be interesting because you're not necessarily zoning it for the developer, you're zoning it for the zoning. And so I wanted to understand, if this developer isn't the developer, how do we make sure that it's used in a way that's appropriate for the character of the neighborhood, and so that it doesn't destroy the property values of the people around it?
Right. And like I said, if I don't want to repeat myself, but there will be nothing is allowed to, once a zone is put into M1, just like the pieces beside that. While they have the zoning, the developer has the zoning on the 3 lots to the east side of that, and even Sunflower Commerce Park, while it's platted, we still have to know what's coming in. We still have to have site plan, building permit has to be done. There's a lot that has to go through before anything can be done. So.
Very good. Any other questions for planning or governing? Any other governing body questions for city manager or attorney or others?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean.
I was just going to request a 5-minute bathroom recess if we can.
I'll second that.
A motion by Mr. Dean for a recess and second by Ms. Hamburg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Too bad. Motion passes 5-1 or a 5-minute recess. Okay, we held a 5-minute recess. We can call the meeting back to order, and the next thing to do is at this time, we'll ask each governing body member to discuss your review and factors presented by the Planning Commission, city staff, and zoning report. And please share your findings and decisions. So I'll start off, and as you know, I tend to be a little wordy, so please bear with me. So I did listen to all who've shared their opinions, both for and against the zoning change. And I've read all the staff reports and reviewed the Planning Commission minutes. Understanding the importance of the golden factors, I independently reviewed each factor and determined the evidence supports a zoning change. And I'm not trying to be disparaging of the protest position here, but I am very concerned with this, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I find the arguments in the protest petition to be fairly spacious. They look good on surface, but when compared with the facts, they are misleading. I will not go into a point-by-point rebuttal, as that would extend this meeting several hours. And I surmise the protest petition may have been filed only as a placeholder, but that is a speculation on my part. So one glaring item in the protest petition is the term rural residential. There is no property under consideration or within the boundaries of the proper notice that have this zoning designation. Yet the petition uses that term 15 times. So the petition represents properties that are zoned R1 in City of Keachai. R1 zoning is single family residential, and you can see the City of Keachai zoning regulation dated June 10th, 2021, paragraph 6.4. These are not rural as alluded in the petition. They are residential within the boundaries of the City of Keachai, Kansas. So there was a comment about Bel Aire Code 18.7.1, which defines rural rural residential district. And I'll not go into all the details of that other than to say that you can look that up on our city code. The property zoned RR. This is a single family. Okay, I'm lost my place here. But these properties are in City of Keachai. The properties are zoned R1 in City of Keachai and do not fall under the requirements of Bel Aire City Code. And so the jurisdiction is Keachai City Code. Further to clarify, Wichita Sedgwick County Unified Zoning Code adopted July 9th of 2009 under Article 3, Section 2 states that the RR, Rural Residential District, is intended for application in unincorporated Sedgwick County. Clearly, the proposed change nor the properties represented by the petition fall within this definition. So with 15 references to rural residential, this is more than a scrivener's error, typographical error. It is clear the use of the term was deliberate and spacious. So the primary, I've looked at all the golden factors, but the primary ones I'm going to focus on are three that I use to consider my decision. So the first one is golden factor 1, which is that we consider the character of the neighborhood. So there are zoning boundaries for subject property, K254 on the north and Rock Road on the west. These are well-established thoroughfares in the metropolitan area. Growth along these thoroughfare roads is a natural and normal course of progress. I have personally observed this growth along Rock Road over the years. I remember the 1970s when the intersection of Rock and 37th Street were both dirt roads, and the National Cash Register Company, also known as NCR, built the current building on the southeast corner of that intersection. More recently, that building was a location of NetApps, and now is occupied by Grace Roberts and Integra. I know this history because NCR was a customer of my employer in the 1970s, and I personally delivered parts to the NCR building. Everything that exists today around that area has been built since that time. This is just a natural progression of development along this thoroughfare. Any buyer of property adjacent to Rock Road on the subject property with proper due diligence would have reasonably anticipated eventual development of the subject property with appropriate zoning, even as an M1. Golden factor 4 says that we have to consider the extent to which the change will detrimentally affect nearby property. And as the staff report states, and this is a subjective question, the focus should be on facts, not fears, and should be based on issues that zoning can address. So since no development plat has been proposed by the property owner, the city cannot address specific details of such development. However, the city's zoning ordinance requires that M1 zoning must have a planned unit development in place before any building commences. It is at that time that the consideration of a PUD to have a discussion about the adequacy of proposed buffers and screening. There has been more work done on this zoning change to address traffic concerns than any prior zoning change that I can recall in the history of Bel Aire. KDOT is currently working on a management plan for K254. KDOT held a public meeting of that work in progress on June 27th, 2023. Any interested person who was encouraged to attend that meeting. There will be more public meetings as KDOT advances their plans. This is a fact. An additional fact is that City of Bel Aire has contracted with Trans Systems to perform traffic study of the immediate area to make recommendations for potential future needs. So the City of Bel Aire and KDOT are both very proactive to assure that potential increased traffic is properly mitigated so that to minimize detrimental effects of the nearby property. However, no specific traffic plans can be developed or advanced until a specific plat of proposed development is presented to the city for consideration. So while KDOT project will proceed regardless of the development of this property, the Trans Systems traffic study recommendations cannot be finalized until the city has a specific plat for proposed development. Doing any more than a study at this time would be acting in pure speculation. Acting on speculation is not something the City of Bel Aire simply has the resources to pursue and could very well be a waste of money. So the city is very, very proactive to minimize any potential detrimental effect of nearby property due to the potential increased traffic. The Golden Factor 5 says we have to consider the length of the property has been vacant as zoned. And I know there's differences of opinion of this, but the property was owned by the City of Bel Aire for 20 years and marketed for sale for the entire time. Until a year ago, there was no interest from any purchaser to improve or utilize this land. We now have a developer that has a vision based on the city's comprehensive development plan to construct what intended when this land was bought 20 years ago. I see no negative impact to the public health, safety, welfare of neighbors, and lastly, the Planning Commission staff are recommending this zoning change. So I will be voting in favor of this ordinance. I'll now ask Ms. Hamburg, please discuss your review and factors and present by the Planning Commission, city staff, and zoning report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have spent a lot of time thinking about this. Last night I drove through Heritage Hills, and it's a really beautiful residential area with a really good feel with the gravel roads and the horseshoe in and out back to Rock Road. So I am extremely sympathetic to those residents because I wouldn't be wild about this zoning change if I were a resident there. But I did consider all of the golden factors. As I said, the character of the neighborhood, that was one portion of it to the west there. But 254 is a big piece of it for me there. That is a natural place for more development. And then additionally, even though it's currently vacant, the zoning to the east that is also M1. So I have considered all of this. I've looked at the staff's report, which is another factor, and their opinions. One of the things that I was hung up on coming in here tonight was clarified by Councilmember Smith in the question of the PUD, because we have this thing in mind that may or may not happen, and we're voting on a forever, basically forever, zoning change to that land. And so with the clarification from Mr. Cook that PUD is going to go forward with any future development, with any future owners of that land, I am comfortable with that, with the eyes and the checkpoints from staff and from Planning Commission and from City Council every step of the way to make sure that whatever does go in there will be appropriate and address the very valid concerns about light pollution, smells, toxic runoff, anything like that. So I am, after considering everything as a whole, I'm going to support this zoning change. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Welch.
I too read all the documents, including the two petitions, went through the golden factors. I did not prepare a statement. I slightly lean in favor of the M1. I did have concerns whether or not we would be able to tie that to anything? And the answer was legally no. The only thing we can tie it to is the PUD. So that'll leave some of my concerns because, you know, if I lived next to it, I'd be worried about it too. But I think the current proposal will give a good result for everybody. But we can't rely on that. You know, that something could happen that it all falls through, and 2 years from now we're going through some other thing. As far as which golden factors influenced me the most was the zoning around it, that most of it, except for Heritage Hill, is something more high use, at least commercial in flavor, than anything else. And so I don't see a problem with M1 if I ignored Heritage Hill. So that would be the most of my basis for voting for this. And like I said, if I lived there, I'd be very hesitant about this too when I would have first heard about it. I checked to see what other things we could do to bind the land to some type of development, and no legal option is available. So we either vote for M1 or we don't vote for M1. And the biggest thing that would sway me one way or the other was the property owner opinions, and it seemed to kind of come out 50-50 from everything I've heard. So I didn't weigh that as too high of a factor. So I will vote for the M1. I'm not exactly over thrilled about it, but I will vote for it.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I shared a couple of my comments earlier on some of the golden factors that I was thinking about as I was asking Mr. Cook some questions. But a big one for me is thinking about the character of the neighborhood. The proximity to 254, I think, is really significant there. Properties on a major highway in a city aren't usually agriculture. That doesn't seem appropriate. It's been in the master plan that something's going to be built there that's not agriculture. That could be a number of things. Somebody referenced a McDonald's in the public comments. You see those a lot along highways. That's similar to what you see up in El Dorado. You see Walmarts along highways. It's less common, at least from my observations, to just see agriculture on a highway in the middle of the city. So thinking about that and thinking about the specific plans that we've heard for this M1 zoning with PUD, if it were just M1, I wouldn't vote for this. It's M1 with PUD. And I think with the PUD, I can see a reasonable way for a developer to use this property in a way that's conducive with all of the character of the neighborhood, all of the surrounding area, including the residential that's across the street. But it's because of that PUD. And I think that, because I can foresee a way that the property owner could use that in a way that creates more value for him and it be consistent with, the surrounding community, it makes sense to move forward with this.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. David.
Mr. Mayor, I want to first off thank the planning committee for a thankless job, and also the Heritage Hill neighbors for voicing their anxiety and understandable anxiety, but it was well stated. I like everyone, I read through the arguments on both sides very thoroughly. The agricultural doesn't seem to fit, so that was a big one. The PUD, I'd ask about that before the meeting as well, how that's tied to the M1. And Mr. Cook's explanation was very helpful of how the robust process that it has to go through to get all that approved. So considering all that, I don't see any way that I can outweigh the staff recommendation, the staff and planning commission recommendation. So I'll also be voting in support of it.
Thank you. Mr. Dean.
Mr. Mayor, after attending the planning commission meeting, I listened intently to everyone who spoke at the meeting. I also read the planning commission minutes, the staff reports, along with the most recent and former protest petition. We have heard presentations from public tonight, as well as from Jay. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time. This is something that's an important decision. So all those things are taken into consideration. The Planning Commission was diligent, in my opinion, of considering the golden factors, and I came to the same conclusion. I agree with many of the points that were made by my fellow council members and mayor. Therefore, I will be supporting the recommendations tonight from the Planning Commission. There were some that spoke in opposition at the Planning Commission meeting and during tonight's meeting. Though I hear their concerns, I believe that the zone change meets all of the items outlined in the golden factors. I do, however, want to make a statement on the common concern that has been mentioned at both the Planning Commission meeting as well as tonight, and that was on traffic and safety. I wanted to first remind everyone that, like many have spoke before, that this is a zoning and proposed land use matter, and is early in the process. We are not here to specifically make a decision on any particular owner, developer, or business, nor any specific needed or wanted road improvements along KT-54 highway, Rock Road, or other. What I will say is it is a very valid concern that many share in Bel Aire, Keachai, and surrounding communities. As we continue to see growth, the good news is advocating for improvements along this corridor didn't just start. A group made of members from Bel Aire, Keachai, Sedgwick, and Butler County, Wichita, to name a few, started the K254 Corridor Development Association back in 2018, and there was advocacy well before then as well, for this exact purpose, the moment we're at right now. Those efforts have been steady. A corridor management plan, as Mayor spoke of earlier, is in the works, and those efforts will continue in addition to focusing efforts along the major areas that have been mentioned by many, Rock, Webb, and Greenwich. All I'll say is stay tuned. That's the work. There's a lot of effort to go. It will require partnership with all locals and KDOT to get it done. So thank you all, and I will be supporting this tonight.
Very good. Thank you. So this is a chance for any further discussion among the council members. If you have other comments or discussion that you'd like to make. One of the things that I think Councilmember Smith, I think Mr. Hendricks had pointed out that he really didn't want a McDonald's in there. If you've done this for C1, this would be a McDonald's. Possibly, I don't know that, but you could have something there that would be maybe less desirable for the neighbors. And I appreciate your concerns in this neighborhood as well. I get it. It's for my neighborhood, I'd have some concerns too. I do think we have the appropriate things in place to keep it becoming a problem. And we are trying to be very proactive about looking at traffic and looking at all the other needs of the area. So it isn't that we're just going to sit on our laurels and see what happens. We're actively pursuing that. So, but council members, please, anything you wish to add would be
Mr. Mayor.
fine. Mr. Smith.
I just wanted to thank the staff for the very thorough staff report. I found that really helpful in reading through and considering all of the golden factors. That was well prepared, and I really appreciated that. Thank you.
Any other comments or concerns before we move on to a motion and vote? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. If anybody wants to make one.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean.
I'll give it a chance. It's kind of convoluted, so I'm going to try to read it correctly here.
Okay.
I believe I'm supposed to be reading the first few sentences here, so here we go. I motion to adopt the findings and factors and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case number ZON-23-01 and approve ordinance number 704, changing the zoning classification from the existing classification that was in effect to M1 industrial PUD, and authorize the mayor to sign any related documents.
Our city attorney, is that the appropriate motion? Okay, just want to make sure that, because he wasn't certain, I wanted to make sure that somebody confirmed that. Thank you.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Dean and a second by Ms. Hamburg. And this will be a roll call vote. So any additional discussion before we call the vote? I'll ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Greg David,
Aye.
Mr. Tyler Dean,
Aye.
Ms. Emily Hamburg,
Aye.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Aye.
Mr. John Welch,
Aye.
and Mayor Jim Benaj.
Aye.
And the motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, well, I do want to thank everyone for their participation tonight. It's been a long meeting and we still have a lot more on our agenda. But any persons who are aggrieved by the final decision of the city council on this matter do have rights provided in law. So thank everyone, and I appreciate all the effort and time. Move on to item B, which is 53rd Street Reconstruction Project requires additional right-of-way. So this is some purchase of right-of-way that we have to acquire for certain areas. Staff has negotiated with one property owner for acquisition, and this action accepts the right-of-way from the property owner. Our city engineer is here to identify the right-of-way and answer questions.
Good evening. The right-of-way in front of you today is for the Kilgore property, which is on the south side of 53rd, approximately halfway between Woodlawn and Oliver. We discussed this property has been necessary for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is currently a 30-foot right-of-way, so it does come into the city's the city's right-of-way by quite a bit. So when redoing 53rd Street, this additional piece of property is necessary to get the continuation of the street for the drainage improvements, to get our 10-foot sidewalk going through the property. Additionally, we're working with the Homestead Senior Development and the Chapel Landing Phase 2 that is on the southwest side of 53rd Street. In order for those properties to be served sewer, we have a lift station at 53rd Street that needs power. The power is intended to go through this 30-foot right-of-way, so it doesn't have to jog out, around, and over. So there's a couple of reasons that we need this right-of-way. I have been working with the Kilgores as well as Mr. Alan Skeens, who is representing the city in negotiating, and also he valued the property on our behalf. So we've been working with him along with Mr. Lasher and Ms. Schrock to get this deal worked out. The Kilgores are willing to sign over the property. We have reached an agreement. That amount was sent to the city council under private cover, under attorney-client privilege. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to stand for them.
At what time will the property be surveyed so that they can move the fence?
The
We want to move the fence as soon as possible, but we also need to survey so that we make
correct.
sure they move it to the right place.
Correct.
So-
The property has already been surveyed by Garver, and it will be staked for the removal and the relocation of the property. The property owners will be working with the city to get that fence relocated. I have told them that I will let them know when we bid the 53rd Street project. So, and then when the start date for that project is, so that fence can get removed prior to that or relocated.
If we're buying the property now, why wouldn't we have them go ahead and move the fence?
That's just been part of the negotiations for the parcel.
So the fence doesn't need to be moved yet, but it will need to be moved when we build the road. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, so the power pole that needs to be in there, the fence is not an encumbrance to that power pole?
That is
you're saying
correct.
needs to be put in there? Okay.
That is correct.
Thank
And
you.
if Ms. Schrock, you were have been in the discussions on this parcel, if you have anything to add.
I don't have anything else to add, but if you have questions, I'm more than happy to help and answer.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Hamburg.
And this includes the entirety of our right-of-way acquisition for the 53rd.
This is
Project,
one,
right.
this is 2 parcels of the 6 that we need to require.
2 of the 6, so there will be a
Correct.
few more coming. Okay.
Correct.
This was the most urgent.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Because we're currently pumping sewage from the lift station to allow folks to move into the Homestead Senior Landing. We're trying to get the power to them as quick as possible. So
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve the receipt of right-of-way from the Lionel W. Kilgore Revocable Trust for the 53rd Street Reconstruction Project sidewalk, stormwater pipes, and drainage ditches, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. David.
Yes.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. Item C, members of the Kansas League of Municipalities, Bel Aire is entitled to 3 votes at the annual business meeting held during the annual conference. This year's conference will be here in Wichita on October 7th through the 9th. And the annual business meeting will be conducted at noon on October 9th. So far, Emily, Ty, and I will have registered. Ty and I can attend the annual business meeting. So Emily, are you available on?
I'm
the
planning on
meeting?
attending the whole session, including Monday the 9th, so I can be a delegate.
Okay, very good. So Emily is also available as voting delegate. And is there anyone else planning to attend this meeting?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I am tentatively planning to attend. I don't necessarily need to be a voting delegate. If you guys are happy doing that, that's fine with me.
Okay. We'll consider you for an alternate. That's the next item.
Mr.
Okay.
Mayor,
Mr. Dean.
same. I'll probably plan to attend, especially with it being in Wichita, but I do not need to be a voting delegate. But if somebody is not able to make it, I would gladly help
Okay.
if needed.
Mr. Mayor, ditto on all.
Okay.
Check.
So we
There we go. We got the next one taken.
got the
care of.
next one taken care of there, huh? Okay, so the first item is, item C is to appoint voting delegates. So if you want to appoint these 3 folks, then I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to appoint Ty Lasher, Jim Benaj, and Emily Hamburg as Bel Aire voting delegates to the 2023 League of Kansas Municipalities Annual Business Meeting.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Welch, a second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. You didn't oppose. Okay. Item D is the same issue. It's just that we need alternates in case for some reason something comes up that somebody can't make it. We need alternates. So if the 3 council members that said they would be willing to do it, you certainly are welcome to list yourselves as alternates, or we do have Ted Henry and Maria Schrock and Daryl Atterbury who will be attending there. So they could also be alternates, but we need to just decide so we can tell the League of Kansas Municipalities who are going to be those alternates.
Mr. Mayor, unless
Okay.
somebody opposes, I'm going to make a motion to appoint council members Dean, David, and Smith as the alternate voting delegates for Bel Aire to the 2023 League of Kansas Municipalities Annual Business Meeting.
Motion by Ms. Hamburg. And I need a second.
Second.
Okay. And I have a second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Wait a minute, you didn't have discussion.
Oh, you want some discussion? I'm sorry.
I do want to
could-
discuss, because if Maria and Ted are going to be there anyway, maybe we should make them alternates, because our other 3 weren't exactly sure about their attendance. They were thinking about going, but
So
As of now, I'm planning to attend.
It's in Wichita. I'm planning to be there, but I don't necessarily have to be a delegate. So I'm good to be a backup.
you're going to be there too, Greg?
I'm okay with Ted or Ty stepping in. I don't have to be an alternate.
Did it is.
Well, I do have an active motion on the floor.
Can I make a substitute
You
motion?
may make a substitute motion.
I will motion to appoint Justin Smith, Tyler Dane, Maria Schrock as Bel Aire alternate voting delegates to the 2023 League of Kansas Municipalities Annual Business Meeting.
I'll second.
A motion by Mr. Welch and a second by Mr. David. According to rules of order, we have to consider the sub-motions before we consider the motion. So any additional discussion on the sub-motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote appointing Justin Smith, Tyler Dean, and Maria Schrock to the as alternates to the League of Kansas Municipalities. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0, and it makes the initial motion moot. Move on to item E. as developer of Sunflower Commerce Park, third has provided a final plat to modify the current PUD. The track is located in Sunflower Commerce Park, second edition, between Webb and Greenwich on 53rd. So on July 13th, the Planning Commission reviewed the final plat and voted by a 4-0 motion to approve the final plat as presented. The staff recommends council accept the dedication with final plat for Sunflower Commerce Park, third edition. Are you going to make a presentation there, Jay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Sunflower Commerce Third is a plat that was brought in. You all have actually voted on the petitions for it at your last meeting. So this is just replatting a pretty good sized lot, 96-acre tract in Sunflower Commerce second edition plat. Property is currently vacant and the applicant desires to subdivide for possible future growth here in Bel Aire. The land was platted for Epic Sports and future growth, but that didn't work out. We've contacted the Evergy, looked at the pipeline easements. The staff has done their due diligence on that. One of the important things to say in this to help you be even more at ease with the rezoning we just had is that this falls under the Sunflower Commerce PUD. So even though this is changing size of lots and things like that, they are still required to adhere to the PUD that was set for Sunflower Commerce Park. So that's the extent of which the PUD is gives the city a lot of say in what's allowed, what's going on. Ann and I have talked to the developer. They have provided drainage plans and is reviewing those to the best of my knowledge. They close to completion on that. So they're just excited to get it platted out and get to moving.
Well, that's good because I didn't tell one of my customers, you guys we're doing this, and if they want one of these buildings, they better speak up.
Right.
So, any discussion or questions for Mr. Cook?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept the dedications within the final plat for Sunflower Commerce Park, third edition SD-23-04, and authorize all required signatures.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Welch, the second by Mr. Dean. This is a roll call vote, so I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Greg David,
Aye.
Mr. Tyler Dean,
Aye.
Miss Emily Hamburg,
Aye.
Mr. Justin Smith,
Aye.
Mr. John Welch,
Aye.
and Mayor Jim Benage.
Aye.
And the motion carries 6-0, Mayor.
Item 12.
There was one thing I meant to mention at the meeting for the petitions. You all had questions about the developers agreement. We were going to have that. I meant to say this a second ago. We received the developers agreement, but staff did not have time to properly vet that document. I didn't want to bring a document after talking with Ms. Schrock as well. We didn't want to bring a document that wasn't properly vetted before you. So the developers agreement should be on your agendas for next meeting. So thank you.
2 weeks. Thank you. Next item is executive session. Does anyone have a need for an executive session? I do not. I don't think we have one. Staff? Okay. We're on to discussion of future issues. So the workshop, August 8th at 6:30. We want to make sure everybody's available for that next Tuesday. So a regular scheduled workshop, August will be, so manager has 3 items. Progress on the revised Bel Aire wastewater pretreatment program by Burns and McDonnell. Report on the current water and wastewater system for Bel Aire by PEC, and final review to the proposed 2023 budget. Anything else we need to add? That sounds like a bunch to talk about. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
just FYI, I'll be out on vacation next week, but I will consider
you wanna remote
dialing
in? Okay, very good.
That's actually the 2024 budget, isn't it?
Yes, you're correct. I'm sorry. Thank you for the clarification. It is 2024. All right. Well, hopefully we'll see everybody next Tuesday. I think we're ready for adjournment unless somebody wants to talk about something else.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Dean.
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dean, a second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Too bad. We're adjourned. Motion carries.